Germany's 91-year debt, the hidden cost of defeat. After World War I, history is filled with wars that ended on the battlefield, but some wars continue long after the guns fall silent. World War I officially ended in 1918, yet for Germany, one of the most devastating consequences of the conflict would last for nearly a century. This is the story of a debt so enormous that Germany would spend 91 years paying it off. It is a story of political struggle, economic collapse, national humiliation, and one controversial treaty that changed the course of modern history. More importantly, it reveals the hidden reason why many historians believe the end of World War I helped create the conditions for an even greater catastrophe, World War II. To understand this remarkable story, we must begin in the aftermath of the Great War. The fall of an empire. By November 1918, Germany was broken. After more than 4 years of brutal fighting, the German Empire faced military defeat. Millions of soldiers had been killed or wounded. Food shortages were widespread. Civil unrest was growing. The once powerful empire of Kaiser Wilhelm II was collapsing before the world's eyes. When the Kaiser abdicated and fled into exile, Germany entered a period of uncertainty unlike anything it had experienced before. But the defeat itself was only the beginning. The real struggle would begin in Paris, the Treaty of Versailles, peace or punishment. In 1919, representatives of the victorious Allied powers gathered at the Palace of Versailles to negotiate the future of Europe. Officially, the goal was peace. In reality, many leaders wanted accountability and punishment. The result was the Treaty of Versailles. For Germany, the treaty contained several devastating provisions. Territory was lost, military forces were drastically reduced, colonies were surrendered. But perhaps the most controversial provision was Article 231, later known as the War Guilt Clause. This clause required Germany and its allies to accept responsibility for the damages caused during the war. For the Allies, it provided the legal justification for reparations. For many Germans, it became a symbol of humiliation. The message seemed clear. Germany would not only lose the war, Germany would pay for it, and the price would be enormous. The shocking Reparations Bill. In 1921, the Reparations Commission announced the final figure. Germany would be required to pay 132 billion gold marks. The number shocked the world. Even economists struggled to understand how a country devastated by war could possibly generate enough wealth to satisfy such demands. Many critics warned that the amount was unrealistic. Others viewed it as necessary compensation for the immense destruction suffered by countries such as France and Belgium. Regardless of the debate, Germany had little choice. The debt had been imposed. Now it had to be paid. What followed became one of the greatest economic crises of the 20th century. The dangerous road to hyperinflation. Germany entered the post-war era carrying a dangerous burden. During the war, German leaders had financed military operations largely through borrowing. The assumption had been simple. Germany would win. The defeated nations would eventually cover the costs. Instead, Germany lost. Now the government faced wartime debt and reparations simultaneously. The Weimar Republic desperately searched for solutions. One of the most disastrous decisions involved printing more money. At first, the strategy appeared to help, but beneath the surface, warning signs were everywhere. The value of the German mark began to collapse. Prices increased rapidly. Confidence disappeared. Then came hyperinflation. The scale of the crisis was almost impossible to comprehend. Workers received wages multiple times each day because money lost value so quickly. Families rushed from factories to stores before prices rose again. Life savings accumulated over decades became worthless in weeks. Some Germans used stacks of banknotes as fuel because they were cheaper than firewood. The economic disaster became one of the defining traumas of modern German history. and many citizens blamed one thing above all else: the Treaty of Versailles. The American connection. By the early 1920s, an alarming reality emerged. If Germany's economy collapsed completely, reparations would never be paid. The international financial system itself was at risk. A solution was needed. In 1924, the Dawes Plan was introduced. The plan represented a remarkable political compromise. American banks would lend money to Germany. Germany would use those funds to pay reparations to Britain and France. Britain and France would then repay wartime debts owed to the United States. Money moved in a giant financial circle. For several years, the system appeared successful. German industry recovered. Investment increased. Economic growth returned. Many observers believed the crisis was finally ending. But there was a hidden weakness. Germany's recovery depended heavily on American loans, and when those loans disappeared, the entire structure would begin to collapse. The Great Depression changes everything. In 1929, the world economy suffered a devastating shock. The Wall Street crash triggered the Great Depression. Almost overnight, American banks stopped lending. The flow of money that had supported Germany vanished. The consequences were immediate. Businesses failed. Factories closed. Banks collapsed. Millions lost their jobs. Desperation spread throughout German society. At the same time, political extremists offered simple explanations for complex problems. Democracy appeared weak. Economic suffering intensified. Public anger continued to grow. These developments created an opening for a political movement that had once been considered marginal. The Nazi Party. The political weaponization of Versailles. Adolf Hitler understood something many politicians did not. The Treaty of Versailles was more than a diplomatic agreement. It had become a powerful symbol, a symbol of defeat, a symbol of humiliation, a symbol of national anger. Throughout the 1920s and early 1930s, Hitler repeatedly attacked the treaty in speeches. He portrayed Germany as a victim. He promised to reverse what he called an unjust settlement. He pledged to restore national pride. For millions of struggling Germans, the message was persuasive. When Hitler became chancellor in 1933, one of his major political objectives was clear. Germany would no longer accept the restrictions imposed after World War I. Reparations payments effectively came to an end. To supporters, this was evidence of strength. To critics, it was a dangerous warning sign. Either way, the post-war order established at Versailles was beginning to unravel. A second disaster for Europe. The collapse of the Versailles system had consequences far beyond Germany. As Hitler expanded German military power and challenged international agreements, tensions increased across Europe. The world moved steadily toward another conflict. In 1939, World War II began. The destruction that followed surpassed even the horrors of the First World War. Entire cities were reduced to ruins. Tens of millions lost their lives. Europe was devastated. When Germany surrendered in 1945, the nation once again faced the consequences of defeat. But this time, the Allied powers approached reparations differently. Rather than relying primarily on massive financial payments, compensation took many forms. Industrial equipment was removed. Technology was transferred. Resources were confiscated. Germany itself was divided. The lessons of the interwar period had not been forgotten. Many policymakers feared repeating what they believed had been one of the great mistakes of the 20th century. The secret chapter most people never hear about. Many assume Germany's World War I debt disappeared after World War II. That assumption is wrong. In 1953, West Germany negotiated the London Debt Agreement. The agreement significantly reduced the country's financial obligations. Approximately half of Germany's debts were cancelled. Repayment schedules became more manageable. Economic recovery was prioritized. The agreement helped create conditions for what became known as the German economic miracle. West Germany rapidly transformed into one of the strongest economies in Europe. Yet one important detail remained. Some obligations connected to World War I were postponed rather than eliminated. Their repayment would depend on a future event. German reunification. At the time, few believed that event would happen anytime soon. The final payment. Then history changed once again. In 1990, East and West Germany reunited. The Cold War ended. Germany became a single nation, and with reunification came a forgotten financial obligation. The postponed interest payments linked to Germany's World War I debt returned. The country resumed payments. Year after year, installments continued. Finally, on October 3, 2010, exactly 20 years after reunification, Germany made its final payment. The debt was gone. 91 years after the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, 91 years after the political decisions that shaped an entire century, the story of Germany's World War I debt is not simply a financial story. It is a warning. A warning about the consequences of political decisions made in moments of victory. A warning about economic instability. A warning about humiliation, resentment, and unintended consequences. The leaders who drafted the Treaty of Versailles hoped to create lasting peace. Instead, many historians argue that parts of the treaty contributed to instability that helped fuel future conflict. Whether one views the reparations as justice or punishment, one fact remains undeniable. The legacy of World War I lasted far longer than anyone imagined. For Germany, the war did not truly end in 1918. In a financial sense, it ended in 2010, a 91-year struggle that reveals how the consequences of war can echo across generations.